Every day, we witness the darker side of this world. We see how people hurt others in ways that are almost impossible to comprehend. It's a harsh reality, and no matter how much we wish to ignore it, we simply can't. I dive deep into the most shocking crimes, trying to understand what drives people to commit such horrifying acts. My name is Ferric, and today I bring you yet another unbelievable but true crime story. Support the channel with a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's dive into this case.
It was late, almost midnight. Most little kids would be fast asleep, but inside a quiet apartment, a toddler's screams echoed through the walls. His cries were sharp and full of pain. In the kitchen, a pot of boiling water sat on the stove. A man rushed to grab his phone, dialing 911. His voice was shaky as he told the operator it was an accident. He said the little boy had been behind him and somehow the hot water spilled. But when paramedics arrived, something didn't add up. The child's burns were too serious, too widespread. The more police looked around, the more questions they had. If this was an accident, why did everything about it feel so wrong? Jabon Babels, known affectionately as Bam Bam or Bamster, was born on July 3, 2009 to parents Byron Babels and Jasmine Thompson in Dallas, Texas. Jasmine, originally from Arkansas, was only 19 years old at the time, while Byron was 37. Jabon had an older brother, just a year and a half ahead of him, and a large extended family. From an early age, he was a bright and talkative little boy, known for his infectious smile, dark brown eyes, and black hair. Unfortunately, Jabon's early years were marked by instability. His father, Byron, was incarcerated for felony forgery not long after his birth. While Byron was behind bars, Jasmine moved on and started a relationship with 37-year-old Carl Malus Delaney Simmons. Carl Malus was no stranger to the criminal justice system. He had a violent past that included a 1994 homicide conviction. He had been involved in a deadly altercation outside a South Dallas bar, which led to a 15-year prison sentence for both the killing and additional drug charges. Released in 2007, he quickly found himself back in legal trouble, getting arrested 2 years later for selling vials of PCP at $15 each. Byron was eventually released on parole in September 2010 and tried to reconnect with his children. However, Jabon and his older brother lived primarily with Jasmine, who had moved in with Carl Nelis. Despite knowing about Carl Nelis's criminal history, Jasmine downplayed it, brushing off concerns about his past and trusting him with her children. She frequently left them under his care while she went to work, believing he treated them like his own. By November 2010, the family had settled into a new apartment at 8110 Skillman Street in the Lake Highlands area of Dallas. Jasmine continued to leave her boys in Carl Nelis's care, unaware of, or perhaps choosing to ignore, the potential danger. On November 4, 2010, while Jasmine sought medical treatment at a hospital for a urinary tract infection, she left her sons in the care of Carl Nelis. That night, at 11:49 p.m., Carl Nelis made a frantic call to 911, reporting that Jabon had been severely burned. He claimed he had been heating water on the stove and hadn't realized the toddler was behind him. According to his account, when he turned, the boiling water accidentally spilled onto the child. During the call, Jasmine arrived home and, along with friends, tried to assist Jabon while Carl Nelis followed the dispatcher's instructions. Paramedics from Dallas Fire Rescue quickly responded and rushed Jabon to Parkland Memorial Hospital. Doctors found third-degree burns covering nearly 30% of his body. His legs, buttocks, right hand, and wrist were severely burned. Additionally, there were noticeable bruises on the left side of his face. Police officers arrived at the hospital at 12:10 a.m. to investigate. Carl Nellis provided them with his version of events, stating that he had been holding a pot of boiling water when Jabon suddenly ran up to him. In a moment of panic, he said, he dropped the pot, causing the water to splash onto the toddler. Jasmine corroborated that she wasn't home at the time and only learned of the incident through Carl Nellis's phone call. However, medical professionals raised concerns. The severity and pattern of Jabon's burns didn't align with Carl Nellis's explanation of a simple accidental spill. Officers noted inconsistencies in his story and decided to dig deeper. Jasmine and Carl Nellis consented to a search of their apartment, and authorities took Carl Nellis to Dallas Police Headquarters for further questioning. Jasmine later recalled that Carl Nellis often cooked for the family, and when she returned home that night, the kitchen appeared as if he had been preparing a meal. But something was off. There was no sign of a recent spill, and investigators were left questioning what had really happened to Jabon that tragic night. The morning after the tragic incident, police returned to the apartment to document the scene. Photographs revealed a box of hamburger helper left out, and a package of pork chops sitting on top of the refrigerator. A towel lay on the floor near the stove, and a large pot containing a small amount of water remained on the stovetop. But the kitchen wasn't the only area of interest. As officers searched the apartment, they uncovered a significant amount of illegal substances. Inside a cabinet above the stove, they found 8 plastic baggies filled with cocaine. The refrigerator contained 95 small brown vials filled with liquid PCP. Along with the drugs, authorities seized a variety of other items, including 27 bottles of flavored vodka, 16 additional bottles of vodka, 17 cigarette lighters, 3 condoms, 4 empty cigar boxes, 43 cigars, a box of cut-up cigarettes, and a stash of cash hidden in the cabinets. Carl Nellis himself was carrying over $1,000 in cash in his pocket, which officers secured as evidence along with the other items. The following morning, on November 5, the Dallas Police Child Abuse Unit took Carl Nellis into custody. He was charged with injury to a child, a first-degree felony. Detectives, alongside Child Protective Services, launched a deeper investigation into the case. Meanwhile, Jabon's older brother, who had been unharmed during the incident, was placed in the care of his grandmother. As for Jabon, he remained in the burn unit at Parkland Memorial Hospital, fighting for his life. His condition was initially not disclosed to the public, but given the extent of his injuries, it was clear he was in critical condition. Jasmine was not considered a suspect, as she had not been home at the time. She repeated what Carl Nellis had told her, that a pot of boiling water had accidentally spilled on her son. However, police and medical professionals were adamant that Jabon's injuries were not consistent with an accidental spill. "They told me it looked like he had been dipped in water," Jasmine recalled. "The doctors told me the same. I'm still searching for the truth." Why she continued to trust Carl Nellis, a man with a violent past and a known drug dealer, over the police and medical experts remains a question that may never be fully answered. For 5 excruciating weeks, little Jabon fought to stay alive. His tiny body was hooked up to countless tubes, a ventilator helping him breathe. In hospital photos, he was nearly unrecognizable, buried under wires and medical equipment designed to keep him alive. Despite doctors' best efforts, his condition worsened. In one of the many surgeries performed in an attempt to save him, doctors were forced to remove about 60% of his intestines due to severe damage. A second surgery took even more. Throughout his hospital stay, his fragile body was racked with infections. His kidneys failed, and swelling distorted his once bright smiling face. The battle finally became too much. On the evening of Saturday, December 11th, at 8:53 p.m., Jabon succumbed to his injuries at Children's Medical Center, Dallas. He had endured 36 days of unimaginable suffering since the night he was burned. Some trauma is simply too overwhelming for the human body to endure, especially for a child barely past his first birthday. As news of Jabon's death spread, the case gained widespread attention. Authorities declared that what had happened to him was no accident. The man accused of causing his fatal injuries, his mother's boyfriend, Carl Nellis, was now facing even more severe legal consequences. In an exclusive interview with News 8 and the Dallas Morning News, Jasmine spoke about her son's suffering. "For more than 5 weeks my baby fought for his life," she said. "No child should have to go through something like this." With tears in her eyes, she added, "I wish it was me lying in that hospital bed instead of him." But while Jasmine still searched for answers, the police had already made up their minds. To them, there was no doubt, this was not a tragic accident. It was a horrific act of violence, and they were determined to hold the person responsible accountable. In June 2013, Carl Nellis filed an appeal challenging his conviction. It was through the documents from the Court of Appeals that the full extent of Jabon's injuries was revealed in chilling detail. When he was admitted to the hospital, doctors found severe burns covering his legs, stretching all the way up to his waist. The most intense burns were located below his knees. Additional burn marks were discovered on the back of both his eyes, around his groin, on his right buttock, the bottoms of both feet, and his right hand. A smaller burn encircled part of his waist. However, there were no burns on his head, face, or shoulders. Disturbingly, bruises were found on his left cheek and around his left ear. Perhaps the most harrowing discovery was that the burns appeared to be hours old by the time Jabon arrived at the hospital. This revelation cast an even darker shadow over the timeline of events. Carl Nellis had called 911 at 11:49 p.m., nearly midnight, not exactly the time one would expect someone to be preparing hamburger helper and pork chops for 2 small children. 3 doctors who had treated Jabon testified for the prosecution. 2 of them were board-certified pediatric specialists in child abuse medicine. All 3 provided the same conclusion. Jabon's injuries were not accidental. They testified that the burn patterns were consistent with forced immersion in scalding liquid. According to their assessment, the little boy had likely been submerged in hot liquid while wearing a diaper. The heat had caused the diaper to leak, which explained the burns on his right buttock. One heartbreaking detail stood out among their findings. Jabon had instinctively curled into the fetal position in an effort to protect himself from the excruciating pain. The medical examiner who later conducted the toddler's autopsy supported the doctor's conclusion, reaffirming that the injuries were consistent with intentional harm rather than an accident. Despite this overwhelming medical evidence, the defense brought in a pediatrician who had never treated Jabon but had reviewed case documents. This doctor claimed that the burns could have been caused by splattering water rather than forced immersion. As part of the appeal, Carl Nellis's attorneys argued that because he was in the middle of cooking a meal and had attempted to assist Jabon after the incident, no rational jury could have found that he had intentionally harmed the child. They also claim that Carl Nellis had simply reacted instinctively when startled by Jabon approaching from behind in the kitchen. However, the appeals court pointed out a glaring omission in Carl Nellis's 911 call. At no point did he provide an explanation for how the boiling water had come into contact with Jabon. Instead, he vaguely stated that he had been boiling water, that he had not seen the toddler behind him, and that, somehow, Jabon had been burned so severely that his skin was peeling off. The appeals court found Carl Nellis's version of events just as unconvincing as the original jury had. The court upheld the trial court's decision, denying his appeal. Carl Nellis Delaney Simmons remains incarcerated at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, housed in the Jim Ferguson unit in Midway, Texas. He will not be eligible for parole until 2040. A wake for Jabon Babels was held at 6 p.m. on Thursday, December 16, at the Golden Gate Funeral Home. His funeral followed the next day. Beyond that, there were no widely documented memorials or vigils held in his honor. Jabon was laid to rest beneath a simple granite headstone, engraved with his full name, Jabon Babels, July 3, 2009, December 11, 2010. Below his name, a tender inscription reads, "There are no tears in heaven." Along the bottom of the stone, a small etching of a train with a teddy bear adds a gentle childlike touch to his final resting place. Earlier last year, his family visited his grave in honor of what would have been his 15th birthday. They cleaned his headstone, adorning it with flowers and balloons as they remembered their beloved Bomb Bomb. Jabon's life was taken before he had the chance to grow beyond infancy. He never got to celebrate his second birthday, never had a first day of kindergarten, never experienced the joy of losing his first tooth, or the excitement of riding a school bus for the first time. Every milestone that should have been ahead of him was stolen, though he never had the opportunity to leave his mark on the world in life. Telling his story ensures that Jabon's memory will endure. May his name live on, not just as a reminder of the injustice he suffered, but as a call to protect those who cannot protect themselves.